going to move around so that you'll have a better view and won't be looking in the sun. Okay, hey, welcome to Field Archaeology 101. A little bit of sun and humidity this morning, and we're back at our dig site. We thought, an interesting break. We've been working on fire pits, and sometimes it's a little bit mundane, but just to kind of look at where we've been, where we're at, where we're headed. And the suggestion came up, well, why don't you talk about or just share what was there when we first started? And I thought, good idea. So basically, around 10 years ago, we began on this site, and you can see it's pretty extensive. And what you don't know is it was a jungle, and the first job was to clear fallen trees, fallen logs, poison ivy, grapevines that were 6-7 inches in diameter, poison ivy that said, "I'm going to eat you alive." We had to clear it, and then after we cleared it, there was a lot of just forest debris on the ground, and it was already established that we had just a pure sand slope that was coming off the ridge here. And we thought, well, dirt works its way off by erodes, and freezing and thawing brings things up. So let's just keep the sand clean and see what happens from year to year. So for the first few years, we did a lot of raking, a lot of cleaning of the area, and some spraying to kill out some of the weeds, poison ivy. And so what I brought today are some of the frames that reflect over the years the things that just work their way out of the sand onto the surface. Now, if you're seeing this on the surface, you can see why we're excited about it every day that we're down here digging up our fire pits and looking for where the lodges were and things of that nature. So come on up and let me show you some of the stuff that we found. I've got some notes that I'll be working from as we look at it. So we have two areas of frames, and these frames simply reflect some of the stuff that was up on the surface. And whenever I look at archaeology, especially on this dig site, I always am looking for, back again, what we did is, we brought frames together that were just surface finds. And the sand, as you know, will erode on its own after every rain. Anybody that's walked fields knows you go in after the rains. Well, in this scenario, it's all sand. So every freezing and thawing season and every rain brings up more stuff. So what we're going to do is just share some of the surface finds. I know I'm repeating, but I want to get this through your mind. And you need to see what we've got going on here. This is stuff that was on the surface. How do we know we had a village or multiple villages? Well, just take a look at what worked its way out over the years. So let's start with this setup right here. And actually, I'm going to start with both surface and stuff that we've dug up. This is steatite, and one of the most unique things that came off the site so far is a little tiny finger bowl with a nipple on the end where they could actually tie sinew and perhaps wear it around their neck. Very unique. And then here's the base of a steatite pot of some sort. And then shards, sides of different pieces. Most of these are in the ground. I mentioned patterns. Patterns are so important. When you're walking fields, when you're working on a site, you're always looking with relationships. How is this related to that? And in this scenario, that's what we did. And already on this site, just on the basis of surface finds, we know that we have different aggregates of cultures that are showing. In this frame, for example, we have a lot of ashtabula points. These washed out on the surface. And to date, we have over 100 ashtabula points that have come off this site. Another finger bowl that washed its way out. But look what we have. We have a consensus of nearly all Coshocton flint. Maybe one, perhaps two, maybe even three Flint Ridge pieces. Everything else is local. We've got some bone that washed its way out on the surface. We have some debitage, or just flint chips from the thinning process, and there were literally hundreds of these but we're not saving all of them. And then you have fragments of points, but look how small a point can be. And this would be the very last culture that was here, a little micro triangular point. Age-wise, we're looking at late Archaic, right through woodland into late woodland in this frame. If we move this direction and we look at our next frame, you'll see that even pottery works its way out on the surface. And again, looking for patterns. This particular rock, people that walk for arrowheads in this county laugh at these and they call them river biscuits. But what I have found on this site, the only time we find these is when it's in conjunction with this. These are shards of pottery. These have been tempered with sand and grit. There's no shell tempering. And we've got two basic cultures that we're working with. We're working with Adena culture, and we're probably working with Hopewell or late woodland cultures with these. Again, minimal Flint Ridge and maximal local cherts and flints from Coshocton County. Coming on across, a broken river biscuit. It's like a wafer of really hard sandstone. A lot of times these things have been ground and polished, and sometimes they're just naturally formed. But either way, present with the pottery. Some of the chips and debitage that's laying on the surface, and the diversity of points. And what I'm looking at is the age sequence on these, and I see that they're all within that late woodland, late woodland. Coming down this direction, this is an exciting frame. Not only is it cool to find these various parts and pieces of pendants or gorgets, but the breakage on this is actually prehistoric breakage. So we have the real deal when it was last in their hands. And I know a lot of thinking is these multiple holes have something to do with repair. We don't know that. It seems logical, and it's a good guess. But what fun is this? This is not only a fluted point, and you can see the flutes going down it. I'm going to flip him. Look at this giant flute going down it. Lateral grinding is real heavy on both sides. Basal grinding is real thick. Laying on the surface. More Flint Ridge. Maybe some Hopewell here. Maybe some Hopewell. Transitional, Adena to Hopewell. Adena. And then again, triangles, late woodland, possibly a preform that might be either late Paleo or late Archaic. Don't know yet. But we've got some Adena pieces peeking out, and we've got some Flint Ridge coming on around. This is cool. Most people would have just walked right over this. Oh, there's a piece of sandstone, but you can't do that on a village site, nor can you do it when you're field walking. You've got to pick up every piece and look it over. And first thing we see is the concave sides that have been polished. The lateral sides and the two ends, proximal, distal ends, are highly polished, and the piece is polished, but no holes drilled in it. You don't have to know what something is to classify it as an artifact. This is very unique on this site. Now we're getting into a lot of Flint Ridge material. This has been called an eccentric. It's obviously a Hopewell piece. Again, the Adena just blended right into the Hopewell. And when that took place, I don't know that we actually know. And we really can't say, oh, here's an example of that transitional. You just find a lot of weird stuff. This is the really neat mossy agate Flint Ridge flint that comes from Flint Ridge area. And then again, a multiplicity of Flint Ridge. And on this site, looking for patterns, when I run into my Flint Ridge here, I slow down, and 9 times out of 10, it's connected to either the Hopewell or Adena culture. Here's an exception. Here's what we call a Flint Ridge piece, Nethers, and it's got the striping in it. And if I flip him, the striping, this was underneath a pile of leaves that I raked on the site. A friend of mine said, oh, don't throw that stuff until you go through it. And I said, there's nothing here. And so I picked up all the debris, and there was this point laying right there on the sand. So you got to go through it slowly. So let's take a break. We'll move over to our other frames and you'll get to look at more stuff that was found on the surface. Okay, looking at more frames that were found on top of the site, no digging involved. I'm especially excited about this little piece, and I'm going to point to them. Everybody laughs down here. Once again, they call these river biscuits, but I can tell you, on this multiple village site, these are only found where there is pottery, and they're found with the pottery, and they all have patina all over them. Look at this little guy, right here. Notches put in it. Sometimes people in their hastiness will call it an anchor. Well, I don't see anchor printed on that anywhere, but it definitely has notches. It may or may not be an anchor. Unique. Again, sweeping through all these things. You'll see a lot of late archaic material. Sometimes these pentagonals are a little bit older, and it's interesting that we find stuff in patterns, in groups. The cultures grouped up, and they had multiple stuff that they used. Sweeping over here again, different river biscuits. This one is drilled, some Medina, some Nethers, Flint Ridge Flint, and just a sweep of the diversity of stuff coming back over here. Once again, getting into the river biscuits where the pottery is, some of the debitage, flake knives, and we have the Flint Ridge popping up all over the place here. And that reflects, again, looking for patterns. We have Hopewell culture, we have a lot of Adena culture here, and those seem to be, the vast majority is Flint Ridge Flint. The rest of the stuff is basically Coshocton. So this is a real quick overview of what we have found on the surface before we even began to dig. So thanks for joining me today. We'll be back again real soon.